and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is going to be a spoiler review. I'll start off quite simple, but then I'm going to get into the themes of this novel and what I really thought about it. So if you've not read it, go away and read it and come back. And if you have read it, then stick around and let's get talking. So this book is about a girl called Addie LaRue. She's a French girl living in the 1700s and she just wants to be wild and free. She doesn't want to be married off. She doesn't want to waste her life just having kids with some guy and then living in this town and dying and never making anything of her life that she actually wants to. She enjoys doing art and things like that. She's a big daydreamer and she makes up this kind of handsome male character that she kind of fantasizes about. She is constantly praying to the gods to try and save her from this boring life, this domestic life that she desperately wants to escape. And on the day of her wedding, she is so desperate that she goes out to pray one last time, doesn't notice the sun setting, and ends up praying to the gods that answer after dark. And this god takes the form of this handsome boy that she's made up and basically tricks her into selling her soul for a life of freedom and living forever, essentially. Now that doesn't sound so bad, except the catch with this curse is that she will never be remembered. Everyone in her family and everyone that she knows in this town instantly forgets her. Not only that, but even if she does come face to face with them and talk to them and make a first impression, the moment they leave the room and go out of sight, they completely forget her again. This is very painful and results in her basically losing everything. She leaves her town and goes to Paris and basically lives on the streets. She has nothing. She can't earn any money. She can't keep anything. Anything that she does try to steal and keep, because she does manage to steal things, she doesn't end up keeping it for very long. It tends to go missing. She can't have any friendships or any relationships or any real connections because they forget her constantly. And she can't even have a home or a place to live. Even when she does find herself squatting in some sort of abandoned place, something happens, like it ends up getting burned down or something like that. She cannot say her name, she cannot tell her story to anyone, they instantly forget it. She cannot write, she can't make an impression on the world in any way. She can't even break things, it just automatically heals again. She can be hurt or injured, but she doesn't stay injured, and she also doesn't age. So she basically exists permanently as a healthy and beautiful 23-year-old woman, but no one knows who she is. She lives a bit like a ghost and can't make any sort of impression. The story follows a dual timeline, so we get this timeline in the 1700s in France, where she is come to terms in the first few initial years with her curse, and we also get a present day timeline in 2014 where she's figured out quite a few things. She manages to have one night stands with people, although they're not really one night stands, they're a series of one night stands. She might date someone for months and they forget her every morning when they wake up. They think they just got really drunk and they're confused about why she's in their bed. She survives basically by stealing everything she needs: money, clothes, food. She still doesn't really have a home and can't really hold on to anything or keep anything, but she seems kind of at peace with her life. This present day timeline is set in New York City. She's also, in this present day timeline, managing to make a tiny bit of an impression by inspiring artists, musicians, becoming a bit of a muse. So she might play the piano for them every day, sing little bits of a tune, and then over time they are going away and writing that down and they think that they came up with it themselves. People draw her over the years and make artwork about her, but it's never got any discernible features of hers apart from perhaps her 7 freckles that are repeatedly mentioned throughout the book. They're described as a constellation of stars. The language is quite like that. It's a little bit flowery, a little bit prosy, but it's not too far. It's still enjoyable, it's still clear and easy to read, but quite a nice experience. A little bit poetic, but not too far. This flipping back and forth between the present day timeline and the past timeline keeps things interesting and keeps things moving forwards. Without that, it would be quite a slow book. Sometimes when there's a lot of action happening in one timeline, the other timeline is a little bit more low-key, and then vice versa. I think that was done quite well. You get a good 2 or 3 chapters from each timeline before it switches back again. But sometimes you'll get a little bit of a cliffhanger in one timeline and then have to spend a couple of chapters in the other timeline, and you kind of lose that drive a little bit, and it does disrupt the pacing slightly. We also have a romance going on in each of these timelines. So in the early timeline, we have this enemies to kind of lovers story between her and the demon that cursed her. She's very angry with him. She's constantly trying to defy him. Even though her life is hard, she goes on living just to spite him. And in the early days of this timeline, they are just straight up kind of enemies. He's constantly trying to push her boundaries and get her to give in, and she doesn't. But because he's the only one she can really connect with, she does form a bit of an attachment to him, and it's implied that he forms a bit of an attachment back because is quite lonely being a demon apparently. The romantic element in the relationship doesn't really kick in properly until like part 6 or maybe even part 5 of the book. So it takes us a while to get there, but they do have really good chemistry. Then in the present day timeline, we have a romance with a boy named Henry. Henry is different from everyone else because when she meets him, she tries to steal a book from his bookstore and he catches her and he remembers her. This blows her mind because no one's ever been able to remember her, and not only can he remember her, she can actually tell him her name, she can tell him her story, and he can write it down and help her to create art without her having to be kind of a background muse. Henry is a little bit different for more reasons than just this. We find that people in Henry's life around him seem to respond in quite a weird and intense way to him. Around the midpoint of the novel, we get a whole section from Henry's kind of point of view, where we find out that Henry has also made a deal with this demon, and that his deal is that everyone will always love him and that he will always be enough for them. This means that whatever they want and need from him, they see in him. It's like extreme projection. But the downside to this is that they never have genuine feelings for him. They're always loving Henry for who they want him to be and not for who he actually is. And this is also very isolating and lonely for him. One of the people that really loves and becomes obsessive about Henry is actually his ex-boyfriend, who initially dumped Henry and broke Henry's heart. Now Henry's kind of doomed to constantly break this boy's heart back, because he knows that Robbie doesn't really love him and doesn't really want to be with who he really is. And this is the crux of this novel's theme and the question that it asks. I think that what this novel is trying to say, very obviously, is that so often what we desperately want is actually a poisoned chalice, and it gets us to question the true nature of love and what love really is. However, I feel the conclusion of this novel and some of the payoff didn't really answer these questions in a satisfactory manner for me, and I'm going to just get into discussing that a little bit. I did really enjoy this book and gave it about 4 stars, but it was these things for me that just brought it down from a 5-star to a 4. Let's start by talking a little bit more about Addie's curse. So Addie just wanted to live and be free and be really unburdened. This makes complete sense given the position she's in, just kind of being sold off and expected to marry and have kids and do not a lot else. That's completely understandable, and I would probably feel the exact same way, especially in that day and age where you're not marrying for love and you don't really have much say in whether or not you have children. But I think Addie's also a little bit naive in that she doesn't see any good sides or any positives that could come from having a family at all. I don't think she ever really considers that having responsibility and having a family can also bring a lot of quality to her life. And I know it doesn't for everyone, but it does for a lot of people that have children. She just wants to be young and live forever and go travelling and see the world and see all of this art and see all of these sights, and that is what she goes on to do. She lives a long life. We see her at 300 years old and there's no sign of her stopping anytime soon. We and the demon Luke sees that every time her resolve is starting to break down, she sees some beautiful art or sees something else or a sunset, and then she's like happy to keep on living. And while those things are great, I think life and quality of life is about more than just like seeing cool things and pretty things. The story does go into a lot of her anguish about being unable to form attachments and have relationships, but I feel like there's even more of a focus and more of a struggle about her just not having things or a home and a place to be, of not being able to tell her story or say her name. I think I would have liked to see a little bit more pain from that struggling to connect with other people than about the things. I know we did get a few segments where she's forming connections with particular men and they forget her every morning, and that really hurts her, especially the first time it happens. But it does seem like in the later timeline she has kind of come to terms with that a little bit more. I feel like in the modern timeline when she met Henry, we were going to finally see her have a real connection and really come alive with that. And then when she loses that, finally feel like the doom and the real consequences of her choices. But instead what we got was that while he was everything that she needed and that he could remember her, she doesn't really fall in love with him, and she finds herself questioning, is this love? She seems to forget this when she finds out that Henry's actually going to die in about a month, and then she works really hard to save him. But it doesn't really feel like it's out of genuine love. It feels like he just deserves to survive, and she works hard to help that happen because of that. As a result, when she gives up Henry and her life with Henry, it doesn't really feel like a loss because it feels like she didn't really love him anyway. It almost feels like a good excuse to break up, because I think in their situation and them being everything that each other needed, it would have been really hard to break up from the lack of spark. I also think this lack of spark just shows how non-human she's become. She's become almost a god, demon-like Luke. I also feel like her struggle to love Henry is because she's so emotionally stunted. Like, we don't see much character development in her in these 300 years. And that's because she can't really grow as a person. She can't really figure out how to truly be there and love another person because she can't form lasting connections. The only other connection she has is a very toxic relationship with Luke, who she can never fully trust because he's constantly trying to buy her soul, or rather take the soul that she's already sold to him. I thought Luke the Demon was a bit of an odd character. I feel like he didn't have that much to him, although he did have a lot of charisma, and there was a lot of chemistry with Addie. I feel like I couldn't tell you a lot about his personality traits, and that made it really hard to discern whether he truly developed feelings for Addie or if he was just manipulating her the whole time. I feel like I don't know enough about his nature and his capacity for love, or what his life, quote unquote, actually looks like. We see him in interactions with Addie, and we do see him going to collect the souls of other people he's formed deals with. However, I have no idea where he goes or how he lives when he's not doing this. I don't know if he's come from hell or the underworld or some other place, and I don't really know what that place looks like. I also don't know what Addie's life would look like in this afterlife if she gave up to Luke. I don't know what him taking her soul would accomplish for him, what it would mean for her truly, apart from losing your soul, which is quite vague. Would it just be blank? Would she cease to exist? And would that be so bad? I think if she was going to burn in hell and be tortured, you could see why she would want to resist that. Or it could mean going to the underworld and kind of being his goddess bride, which would be low-key kind of cool. I would kind of root for her to make that decision because her and him had good chemistry. She's obviously not very human at this point, doesn't really have much capacity to love herself, it seems, because of this strange life that she's led. And fully giving into that darkness and choosing to be with him properly would have been kind of a cool ending. But I think what I'm trying to say is her giving in to Luke, it doesn't feel that catastrophic to me, especially when she doesn't appear to really love Henry. And so the stakes are kind of lost a little bit. I also feel like her just continuing to live as she is and just see cool things is not sustainable, and I don't really root for that either. I want to see her either fully give herself over to Luke or fully be free of the curse, rather than continuing to live this kind of half ghost-like life. I kind of wanted the point of this story to be living a long life where you get to just go around and travel and see things actually isn't the best quality of life, and what you really want and what makes life worth living is love and connections. But I don't really think we got that. I think we just got we can just go on living like this and it's fine, it's not that bad. And the sacrifice she makes in the end to save Henry doesn't feel like that much of a sacrifice, because she's just going to have good sex with this demon for a few decades, and then she's going to annoy him into leaving her again eventually, and then they're just going to continue to live as they have lived for the past 300 years for hundreds and hundreds more, and she's just going to keep going around stealing stuff and seeing things. And she doesn't even really need to do that for very long, because she just needs to do it for 60 or so years until Henry passes away, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't sound that bad. I think all of this lessened the emotional impact for me. I know some people read this book and were really crying and sobbing at the end, but I kind of knew Henry wasn't going to die, so I just was okay, it was a nice end that he wrote her story and that she got to see that, and that we get the impression that she's going to stay true to herself and keep resisting and fighting the fight. But it all feels a bit pointless and a bit meaningless when it's what are you fighting for if not for love? Just to continue existing? And if she'd given herself over and become some sort of demon goddess alongside of him, that would have felt like a true character journey, a true emotional journey. it would have felt more like a cautionary tale, like more like a Greek tragedy. Instead it feels like the tragedy is like life goes on and they kind of return to a bit of a stasis, and that just doesn't feel that satisfying to me. In that way, the theme of the novel feels a little confused to me. Like, the question it sets out is, can Addie live this life where she can't ever make an impression or form a relationship? And the answer should have been yes, until she learns what she's truly missing, and once she has that, she can't go on as she was. Or the answer is no, life isn't actually worth living without relationships and meaning, and therefore you are going to give in to the darkness eventually and become kind of a lesser human. But instead the answer we got is yeah, as long as she can like continue to travel and see things and influence art a little bit. And that's a little bit disappointing, not gonna lie. And also, we spent so much time with Henry, we got that whole segment from his point of view, and I did find him quite interesting. But in the end, I don't feel like he had a very satisfactory end either, because he just like lost Addie, wrote her story and published it, which was nice. And then what? He's just going to go on living? He's just never going to find out what happens to her and live in a state of limerence? I don't know what aspects of his deal she changed, if it was just dying at that moment, if they just removed that part of the deal, or if they removed the whole deal entirely. It doesn't feel like Luke would do that. So does Henry still have this curse where no one's ever going to truly love him? And because that's quite tragic. If we really felt the emotions of he's lost the one girl who could objectively love him, that would feel more emotional. Except we know that Addie didn't really love him, and that it was never going to be that genuine, because you can't love someone just because they're your everything. Like, she only really had a connection with him because he could remember her. If other people could remember her, she probably wouldn't have ended up in such an intense relationship with him. I kind of want those answers about whether that part of the curse is still open or not. The author could even have hinted at that and not given us a straight answer, but at least made us question it. But I feel like she just didn't address that at all in the end. It was all about Addie and what had happened to her. And I think this question that his curse poses about the difference between love and projection and admiration would have been interesting to explore in more depth. It's a little bit like being a celebrity, like everyone has an idea of you and projects onto you and loves you, but they don't really know you as a person, and that's kind of the life Henry lives. I just kind of want to know if he's continuing to live that life or if he's gone back to normal. Because if he hasn't gone back to normal, that's a shame, and he's probably just going to miss Addie forever, and that's a bit sad. Anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think happened to Henry in the end. Let me know if you agree or if you completely disagree and you're just like, I love this book, shut the fuck up. I think from other reviews I've seen online, because this has been a very popular book, people either love it, it's like 5 stars, it's like their favourite thing ever, or people are a bit like, meh, it was a bit slow, it was a bit flowery, the curse didn't make sense because if people went to the toilet while they spent time with her, they would forget her, which it would, but I'm not going to be that person that gets really into the details, the toilet details. Lots of things in books and films don't make sense when you go down to that bathroom level. And we don't always need that to be in our stories, unless it's Tywin Lannister getting shot on the toilet by Tyrion. But that's George R.R. Martin for you, I guess. But yeah, I'm in the middle of this, loving it, criticising it. 4 stars, could have been 5 stars if those questions had been addressed properly in the themes. I didn't find it as moving in the end as I wanted to, but I did really enjoy it, and I thought it was a really cool and interesting idea. I loved being in the world. I loved this idea of the old gods. I loved reflecting and thinking about, like, what would my ideal be? What's the thing I want most in the world, and how much would that be a poison chalice? I think we probably all have something. Mine would honestly probably be just like being really comfy and cozy and having a really nice like space to decompress and just chill out and be happy in. And the cursed chalice part of that would be that I would just never get anything done, never go exploring, never see the world, never go out of my comfort zone, and I would just maybe waste my life a little bit. That honestly doesn't sound that different to how I live my life some weekends already. But I'm an exhausted person, what can I say? The burnout is real. But I'll take this book as a warning to get out of my comfort zone a little bit and maybe see the world like Addie does. Let me know what your curse would be. That might be fun, just talking about our flaws and our curses together in the comments. Subscribe for more bookish chats, and I'll see you in the next video. Only if you subscribe. Please subscribe. Don't have a lot of subscribers. Come on. We talk about good things on this channel, like curses and what curses we would have. join me for the fun and follow me on Instagram, Corinne is Literate, same handles here. I share bookish memes in my stories, so follow for that. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!